welcome everybody to the board meeting. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and its component units. It's now called to order due to the ongoing public health crisis and in light of the advice from the CDC and the states of New York and New Jersey. Today's meeting is being held virtually via teleconference with audio being live streamed from the Port Authority website. On November 5th, the Committees on Audit and Finance met in executive session. On November 10th, the Committees on Finance and Operations met jointly in executive session. Earlier today, the Committees of Finance and Audit met jointly in executive session. Their reports will be filed with the official minutes of today's board meeting. The Commissioners also met in executive session earlier today to discuss matters related to personnel or personnel procedures, matters involving public safety or law enforcement, and to discuss and act upon matters involving ongoing negotiations or reviews of contracts and proposals. I now request that our Executive Director provide his report, which will include an update on the agency's response to COVID. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Coping with the COVID-19 crisis continues to dominate the agency's agenda as we approach the end of the year and plan for 2021. I'm pleased to be able to report to the board that all our facilities continue to operate at a very high standard. As the positivity rate for COVID-19 increases across the country and in the region, the Port Authority continues to follow meticulously the guidance from the New York and New Jersey State Departments of Health, as well as the CDC. And as an agency, we remain committed to constantly reviewing policies and protocols to ensure that our facilities are safe. We continue to be profoundly grateful to all Port Authority employees for their continued commitment and hard work, and to be grateful to the leadership of the 23 unions that represent the majority of our employees. All have been critical as the agency navigates this crisis. Mr. Chairman, I say that every meeting, but I think it bears a particular emphasis as we confront the increased positivity and to take note of the extraordinary commitment of the employees of this agency. I also am about to turn to the 2021 budget, Mr. Chairman, which we will hear shortly in more detail from our CFO. And again, I want to pay tribute and say thank you to the leadership, to all of the non-represented management employees, as well as to all of the representative employees as we fashion the 2021 budget and recognize and have secured input from across the agency as to how to put this budget together. The leadership of the agency has been heavily focused on the 2021 budget, and as I said, our Chief Financial Officer, Libby McCarthy, will momentarily provide a detailed overview of the proposed 2021 budget. To introduce that, I would like to make three headline observations. First, this 2021 budget of $7.3 billion represents a 15% reduction from our pre-COVID planned spending levels. That reduction is driven by the dramatic impact and lowering of the agency's revenues as a result of the COVID crisis. Second, with respect to the capital budget, to date in 2020, the agency's capital spending has been cut back by $1 billion below our 2020 adopted capital budget. The proposed 2021 capital budget of $2.4 billion would represent a further 33% reduction, $1.2 billion, in our planned 2021 investment in critical infrastructure across all Port Authority facilities. That reduction is as compared to the amount originally planned for 2021 in our historic $37 billion 10-year capital plan. In the absence of federal funding, these two reductions together, 20 and 21, would total $2.2 billion, with further reductions required in 2022, bringing up the agency up to the $3 billion requested in federal aid. These reductions are all driven by the severe adverse effect on the agency's capital capacity caused by the impact of COVID-19 on our net revenues. If we are forced to live with this proposed reduced allocation in the absence of federal aid, we will simply not be able to proceed to implement the capital project as contemplated in the agency's current 10-year capital plan. We will not make final decisions regarding the impact of this reduction on individual capital projects until we know more about what aid will be forthcoming from DC, particularly in this post-election period and in anticipation of a new Biden administration. Third, this is an austerity operating budget. The proposed operating expense budget of $3.3 billion seeks to extend the expense reductions that we put in place in 2020 and incorporate multiple additional cost reduction initiatives in order to offset built-in expense increases such as annual rent increases, utilities, and cost escalators built into agency contracts, as well as offset the substantial additional expense the agency has committed to COVID cleaning and disinfecting safety protocols. These cost reduction initiatives include a reduction in the agency's authorized headcount positions of more than 600, a 7% overall headcount reduction. More than 90% of this reduction is being achieved through attrition and voluntary severance programs that have occurred in the last 6 months of 2020. All these reductions, while difficult, are simply what the agency must do to respond to the coronavirus crisis. Finally, to emphasize with respect to the capital budget, we will continue capital projects currently in construction, but we continue to hold off final decisions regarding pre-construction capital projects until we have greater clarity on the possibility of federal aid. The multi-billion-dollar reduction in our proposed 2021 and beyond capital budget could, of course, be dramatically ameliorated if the federal government enacts a substantial federal relief package. Let me now turn to our facility operating volumes. Based on the week of November 9th to November 13th, the immediate last week, our numbers were as follows. At the airports, passenger volumes for that week were down by 77% compared to the November 2019 average. At PATH average weekday ridership for that week was down by 78% compared to the November 2019 weekday average. At our bridges and tunnels, overall weekday vehicular traffic was 14% down compared to November 2019. This represents a decrease in overall vehicular volumes from the 10 to 12% declines our bridges and tunnels had been experiencing for much of the fall. The agency will track these numbers closely in the coming weeks to determine whether this is any part of a longer-term reaction to rising coronavirus positivity rates in the region or simply represents a temporary drop. At the port's October cargo volumes are not yet available to report in detail, but we project that they will be at or above 2019 levels following the strong volume trend of record August and September months. We anticipate that the port's October data will be available in the next week or so. The overall financial impact of these low activity values is simply stated continuing to be grim. If the region's rising coronavirus infection rates force the states of New York and New Jersey to reimpose stricter coronavirus restrictions, our facility activity levels could decline further. A brief comment on the agency's October results, which you will hear in more detail about in a moment. The continuing extremely low volume of activity at the airports and PATH in particular, as well as the drop of vehicular traffic at the bridges and tunnels, continue to generate continuing revenue loss of unprecedented proportions. The net impact to date of the reduced activity levels from COVID-19 is very simply devastatingly negative. Through October, we now have our actual results. Through our October, we have booked lost revenue. Our revenue levels have come in, and we have specifically recognized now that our volumes now total through October, through the 8 months since the virus crisis began, approximately $1.4 billion of lost revenue. This revenue loss, representing one of the worst financial downturns in the Port Authority's recent history, is completely driven by the adverse impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. And with 6 weeks left in 2020, the Port Authority's revenue forecast for the year is now clear. It's crystal clear. That projection is for a revenue loss of $1.7 billion from March through the end of the year. The agency's actual revenue losses experienced between March and October, combined with our year-end forecasted loss, continues to validate our estimate of a $3 billion revenue loss through Q1 of 2022. With respect to the impact of the coronavirus on our employees, as of this Wednesday, as of yesterday, 68 Port Authority employees have reported positive test results for COVID-19 in the last 30 days. We are looking individually at each one of these cases to identify and address root causes with an eye on any needed additional health and safety protocols. As we have looked at these cases in terms of the source of infection, we believe that 30% of these new positive cases come from confirmed non-workplace exposures involving employees' family or travel. More than 60% of these cases could not be traced to a known source. At the present time, 245 employees are currently self-quarantined. As the number of cases and positivity rates climb, we are highly focused on ensuring that the agency remains vigilant, and we are taking all actions we can to ensure the health and safety of our workforce. I am pleased to report that none of our employees are currently hospitalized. We review every positive case individually to learn if any safety protocols need to be strengthened and to assure that the employee has all they need by way of medical care. Free testing continues to be available to all employees at any time that they desire. We will spare no effort to assure the health and safety of our employees, and we remain extraordinarily grateful again for their continued commitment and dedication. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Rick. Just a couple of follow-up comments, Rick. I might have one question. 44 days, Rick, as we discussed, we're going to be hitting the 100th year anniversary of the Port Authority. And as you read the history books over the last, 100 years, this agency has met many challenges. And obviously the challenge we're seeing here in 2020 and 2021 is as significant and far-reaching and financially devastating as any that this agency has ever seen. When you talk about these numbers, Rick, these are just not, theoretical numbers. You talk about $1.4 billion losses from March till October. That is staggering. You talk about $1 billion reduction in capital in 2020. That is staggering. You talk about $1.2 billion less in spending in capital for 2021 to try to balance this. Those are just staggering numbers. This is tough medicine for us to swallow, Rick, but you as the head and the executive team have put together a formula that's going to make us walk into the 100th year with some stability. And while we may hear of other instances of other agencies that have less than stable or less than predictable climates or operations, the Port Authority is moving through, swallowing tough medicine, and keeping its mission statement intact. Rick, I will tell you, when you talk about the employees, I say I agree with you and the fellow commissioners who have watched as 2/3 of our employees have done the operational working day to day coming in since March. We thank them. We thank them. We thank them. And to you, Rick, you have led this charge since March. You have allowed this. You've been the steady captain on the wheel, making sure we get through this very stormy and rocky time. And Rick, I'm hopeful that the feds come out with a $3 billion package to help stabilize our finances. You know, we have to keep this mission intact. We have to keep our operations intact for the region, for every other reason. But we will make this work, Rick. And I want to thank you personally, and the commissioners feel as strongly as I do. Your focus has been not only keeping the Port Authority mission statement intact, it's making sure our employees are safe. Your focus has been making sure we protect and keep our employees working in an environment that is healthy and make sure that they are not going to get sick. And we talk about the low numbers of COVID, knock on wood, that our employees have maintained or impacted. It's a credit to the safety measures you took day one in March, and you continue as we experience a second wave. And I want to thank you on behalf of the 8,000 employees for doing that. To the other individuals who are working remote, we've talked about at some point in time we're going to start staggering back, but that's not going to happen now. Clearly, we're going to experience the second wave and find out where we go. And for those who are working at home and balancing all the needs of the families and balancing the needs of work, we say thank you. It can't be said enough, and we'll say it every meeting until we pull out of this pandemic. Rick, I know there's a lot to talk about this meeting with Libby and the finance folks. It is a tireless exercise that you engage with senior staff about finding the right number, the right balance to make sure we keep the operation moving, keep the projects moving, keeping our people safe while maintaining that we will not, run asunder in terms of lack of financing, and we're going to have to collapse parts of our operations. That's not going to happen under your watch or my watch. So, Rick, thank you very much for your steady leadership. It is probably nowhere in the last 100 years have we had to have a leader like you under a time and circumstance like this, and I want to thank you for being here at this time. Any comments from any commissioners at this time for our executive director?
Mr. Chairman, Kevin McCabe,
Yes.
if I may.
Yes,
I do want to. Thank you. I do want to echo everything that you just said, and you just put it so succinctly and so well. But I'd also just like to add that in conjunction with the executive director and the senior staff and all those who have been working from the port through this pandemic, I also do want to recognize you and my fellow commissioners, especially under your leadership, because working with the director through this time, I know how much time and effort you've been putting into this, and our colleagues as well. But you yourself have made sure that you have both hands on the wheel early with the executive director, and the two of you have done, as you've been doing for the last several years, just a terrific job. Some very choppy waters, to say the least. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioner have any comment or question for our executive director or his report? All righty, seeing none, we're going to move on.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say, I just want to thank you for your comments and echo Commissioner McCabe's comments. I think the partnership we have forged, and it is a close one, and you have devoted untold hours way beyond what you signed up for in terms of handling this crisis. And I remain grateful to you for your support, and grateful to the board for all the support of all the commissioners. And so I just want to say a heartfelt thank you.
That means a lot, Rick. Thank you very much. Our next order of business is a presentation of our Chief Financial Officer, Libby McCarthy, who will discuss the preliminary draft for the 2021 budget, which will be posted on our website for public comment following today's meeting. Libby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Before I jump into the proposed 2021 budget, I think it's important to put some things back in context because this budget is best understood in the context of the impact of COVID-19 on the Port Authority's financial condition. So I'm going to start there. Like many transportation entities in the region and the nation, the Port Authority confronts an extraordinary challenge due to the prolonged impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Port Authority's infrastructure assets are critical for the safe, secure, and efficient movement of people, goods, and supplies throughout the region and must remain fully operational. At the same time, the Port Authority's revenues in 2020 or significantly less than budget as a result of lower activity across its facilities. Financially, the Port Authority is a self-sustaining agency that raises the funds it needs primarily on the basis of its own credit and does not receive recurring funds from either the states of New York and New Jersey or from the federal government. Approximately 1/3 of the Port Authority's revenues are derived from tolls and fares, and the remaining 2/3, which have historically been relatively resilient through economic downturns, are derived from third-party rents and charges for the use of Port Authority facilities. As such, dramatically decreased activity levels have impacted both the Port Authority and its tenants and vendors, causing a substantial negative effect on the Port Authority's financial condition. Notably, the Port Authority currently estimates a reduction in revenue of approximately $3 billion for the 24-month period through March 2022, compared to the pre-COVID-19 budgeted amounts. This is in line with the actual revenue loss the Port Authority has incurred through October of this year. The Port Authority has taken a number of actions in response to this revenue loss, including slowing capital spending for projects not already in construction and a review of the entire capital plan, in addition to reducing operating expenses. And I will discuss these actions in more detail shortly. Nonetheless, even in the face of these significant challenges, the Port Authority is working to keep all of its infrastructure assets open and operating at high performance levels in order to provide the safe, secure, and efficient movement of people and goods throughout the region, and to maintain a high level of safety for Port Authority employees. In early March, the Port Authority began to experience significantly reduced usage compared to previous years and compared to the 2020 operating activity budget. This decreased utilization of Port Authority facilities has had and will continue to have a negative effect on the Port Authority's revenues. Here you can see the precipitous decrease in aviation and PATH activity in 2020. These numbers measure the impact for the full year rather than at the nadir of activity levels that we saw in April of this year. Of note, the significant decline in activity is projected to be sustained into 2021, with aviation and PATH projected to be 46% and 40% below 2019 levels, respectively. This next slide shows activity levels for the vehicles using our bridges and tunnels, as well as containers at our seaport. Can we go to the next slide? These facilities have proven to be more resilient than during the pandemic as they continue to move essential workers and goods through the region. Jim, can we advance to the next slide? Thank you. Still, bridge and tunnel volumes are projected to be 3% below 2019 levels in 2021, while port container activity is projected to be 4% below 2019 levels in 2021. Because of these significant and lasting activity declines, the Port Authority's financial results through October are the worst on record in recent history, reflecting a $1.2 billion reduction in gross operating revenues as compared to the 2020 budget and a $200 million decrease in passenger facility charge collections as compared to the same 10-month period in 2019 due to lower passenger activity at the airports. Combined, this results in an approximately $1.4 billion in lost revenues through October of this year, which is in line with our projected revenue loss of approximately $1.7 billion through year end and the total lost revenue projection of $3 billion for the 24-month period through March of 2022. Now moving on to the budget. Go to the next slide. The proposed 2021 budget responds to the changed environment that we are operating in, balancing our operational needs with the significantly reduced revenues and activities. Overall, the proposed 2021 budget totals $7.3 billion, which is $1.3 billion or 15% below the 2020 budget. In 2021, total revenues are projected to be $980 million below the pre-COVID-19 21 projections. This consists of lower gross operating revenues of $840 million as a result of lower activity across the facilities, in addition to decreased passenger facility charge collections of $140 million as a result of the significantly reduced activity at the airports. These reductions, combined with the estimated lost revenue of in 2020 total $2.7 billion. Moving to operating expenses, in response to the decline in revenues, the proposed operating expense budget of $3.3 billion reflects substantial efforts to reduce expenses. The proposed operating expense budget is 6% below the operating expense amounts we had originally projected for 2021 back in December of 2019, and has been set at a level that is flat compared to 2018 actuals. To accomplish this, the Port Authority was required to offset over 3 years of structural and inflationary expense increases, while also providing the necessary funds to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, maintain our current service levels, and adjust to projected increases in activity across the facilities in 2021. This required the Port Authority to institute cost reductions across the board, including preserving approximately $190 million of COVID-19 cost reductions that were instituted in 2020, reducing 626 positions, or 7%, reducing operating overtime hours by 15%, and significantly reducing contract consultants and materials and supplies spending. As I just mentioned, a portion of the operating expense reductions included a 626 position reduction, or 7%, across the departments through multiple initiatives, including a sweep of existing vacancies created by a hiring freeze that was instituted in 2020 and will carry forward to 2021, voluntary severance programs that were completed in the last 6 months of 2020, expected retirements, and the completion of time-limited assignments, and finally, efficiencies that result in the elimination of certain positions. After accounting for these position reductions, the 2021 budget funds a workforce of 7,955 employees. Now moving on to the capital, the Port Authority did significantly slow capital spending in 2020 as a result of the reduced capital capacity caused by the impact of COVID-19 on net revenues. As such, the Port Authority is estimating an underspend in 2020 of approximately $1 billion as compared to the construction budget for this year. Furthermore, the proposed 2021 capital budget of $2.4 billion reflects a planned reduction of 33%, or $1.2 billion, versus the amount planned for 2021 in our 10-year capital plan. Combined, these reductions of total $2.2 billion over the 2 years, which is significantly below the levels needed to carry out the $37 billion 10-year capital plan spending ambitions. I would like to point out that this proposed 2021 capital budget remains under development and subject to change. Decisions about how to allocate the $2.4 billion in the 2021 capital allocation are part of the agency's ongoing reexamination of its capital plan. Final decisions will await greater clarity on the federal response to the agency's request for additional federal relief. Further, capital spending reductions in 2022 are anticipated. Should the agency receive additional federal COVID-19 stimulus aid, these planned reductions could be ameliorated. In total, The 2021 proposed budget of 7.3 required difficult cuts in capital and operating spending to remain balanced and represents a decrease of $1.3 billion or 15% as compared to the 2020 budget. In continuation of the Port Authority's commitment to the highest standards of accountability and transparency, following this meeting, the proposed 2021 budget will be available for public comment and review on the Port Authority's website. The public is requested to submit comments by December 10th by visiting the Port Authority's website. These comments will be considered by staff and the board in advance of the December 17th board meeting, where we will seek to adopt the 2021 budget. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Libby, and to you and your staff, Libby. Obviously, this was a extraordinary year for you, and the effort and professionalism by you in particular and your staff is greatly appreciated. And never get tired of the updates and the hard work. And I'm sure it's not always easy trying to get those savings and reductions, but you've been amazing, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we would like to thank you as well and the whole organization for helping us work through this difficult budget.
Right. Any commissioners have anything you want to say? Any other follow-up to Libby or questions? All right. Thank you very much, Libby. And now the 2021 budget will be posted on our website for public comment on through December 10th. Jim, we've received no audio or video comments from the public and received only one written statement that was shared with the board earlier. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay, the statement will be filed with the transcripts of today's board meeting and posted on the Port Authority's website after this meeting. I'll point that the one comment that was given to us was not related to the board item that's up for approval later on. We will now proceed with the voting on the one item for the board's consideration, which I will present as chair, as the chair of operations. The item authorizes a 3-year extension of a lease with Frontier Airlines for its use of 2 gates in Terminal B at Newark Liberty International for an aggregate rent of $24.6 million. Prior to making a motion, I ask the corporate secretary if there's any recusals.
There are no recusals required.
Commissioners have any questions or comments? Motion, please.
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chairman O'Toole?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Linford?
Yes.
Commissioner Bagger?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner LaBarbera?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Pacino?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosado?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald? We believe Commissioner McDonald's having computer issues right now.
And we'll just double check. He was, I'm sure he indicated a yes, but let's follow up with that.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay. Is that all?
That's all.
All right. All the votes are in order, and this item has been approved. There being no further business, before we move to adjourn, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving next week. Safe Thanksgiving. Looking forward to coming back here on short return in December. Was it the 19th? 17th? And that'll be our final meeting for until February. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved and happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanksgiving.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe and well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Gary. Appreciate it.
Take
Thank
care.
you all. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Be well.
Be well,
This
everyone.
meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.